Okay, good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to this Foresight webinar. This morning, looking at sustainable aviation fuel and the future for reducing emissions in the aviation sector as well. My name's Tiernan. I'm a conference producer here at Foresight Events. Happy to say that this webinar and this series is sponsored by the Foresight event, which is our clean tech all energy show taking place next February. I urge you to go and check that out if these sort of conversations are your thing and you've been enjoying the series so far. Really excited for this episode today. As I mentioned, we're looking at specifically at sustainable aviation fuel and the wider kind of SAF sector today. We're going to be looking at kind of the policy mechanisms and market interventions that are kind of spurring on this growth. We're going to be looking at the technologies as well that are proving really useful and promising for SAF. And we're also going to be looking at some of those regulatory priorities as well and what's needed there. So I'm not going to say much more than that. I'm going to hand straight over to our speakers, who will do a lot more justice than I will. I'll introduce them all now quickly, and then we'll turn to the first one. So first up, we've got Ismar Sabanovic, who's Manager of Environmental Programs at IATA, the International Air Transport Association. We have Sarah Wilkin, who's founder and CEO of the Fly Green Alliance. We have Sophie Zienkiewicz, who is co-founder of Carbon Neutral Fuels. Then we'll hear from Kayode Osonuga, who is the founder of Information Age Resources. And then rounding out that panel, we'll hear from Kata, Cserep, who is Global Aviation Lead at PA Consulting. So we're looking across the SAF ecosystem this morning. I'm really looking forward to it. So first off, I'm going to hand over to Ismar. You're very welcome, Ismar. The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Tiernan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Happy to be speaking here. I'm just going to share a quick slide deck. I think that will make following what I say easier. So hopefully you can all see the slides now. And I see a thumbs up from Tiernan. Thank you. Yeah, so I would want to give a bit of an IATA perspective. So as an industry association, where we see SAF in the role of decarbonizing flight and how we see that advancement, give a bit of info about what we've been working on, what we've been up to, and hopefully that sort of sets the stage for a bit more detailed discussion from our other panelists today. So jumping right into it, at IATA, and I think this comes to no surprise to anyone here, we see SAF as a key decarbonization lever. So based on our net zero roadmap, we anticipate that SAF would contribute around 60% of our net zero target. So that's quite a lot, especially having in mind that around 0.7% of all jet fuel worldwide is SAF today, so less than 1%, and that's quite a steep ramp up that we need to achieve that to where we think we can get to and where we need to get to actually for a net zero 2050 target. And I have a bit of a scary curve on the right there that shows where we are or where we need to be, and it's very steep, and it's a long way to go. But I think we can do it, and I hopefully today's panel shows some of the ways that we can progress towards that goal, and again really ramp up the production to get to reach our net zero 2050 target as aviation industry. On sort of a bit more positive side of things, the production has doubled year over year. I think roughly for the past 2 years. So the 0.7% today is actually much more than it used to be a year or two ago. And I think it's fair to say that overall both the availability and the cost are kind of seen as main obstacles to greater adoption, and hopefully we can try to tackle at least some of that in today's panel. With that, now jumping further into, so SAF is very important to IATA. So what are we doing about it? And we really approach the SAF topic from multiple directions. So one of them is through our research and publications. So we're looking to be the thought leaders in the industry as our also unique position as a trade association. And we do that through our research and publications. So that this perhaps in more practical terms means that we're trying to understand what are the techno-economic both needs and barriers for SAF ramp up, so that it can ultimately be supported. And we're also doing a lot of capacity building across value chain, again, through our publications, so that to kind of try to make the topic more approachable to everyone. And this sort of pillar will take a lot of learnings from the research and publications, but we do a lot of advocacy. I think that comes again as a no surprise to anyone, that IATA, we do lobby quite heavily. And on the SAF side, this means that first of all, that there are a lot of policies, and I think we'll hear more about them later. But we understand the implications of different policy elements, assess them, and we take learnings from them to try to apply them on a global level. So the idea is, again, that we can take what's best from different policy elements and hopefully try to make other new coming policies a bit more like that, and a bit less of things that we don't like and that do hinder some of the industry's efforts towards decarbonization. We also promote, of course, the adoption of SAF-friendly policies to ramp up and make SAF more accessible. Finally, we don't only want to be a think tank, we also want to be a do tank. And this kind of goes in parallel with all our other efforts, but we want to provide practical solutions. And once again, we are keen to leverage IATA's unique position to provide impartial, so a level playing field, and tools that are accessible at either low or no cost. So to not to add an additional cost element to SAF, on the contrary, to actually save on the existing costs. And as an airline-centric association, we do need to make sure that airline needs are considered and addressed, and ultimately SAF is all about decarbonizing aviation, so we need to have aviation stakeholders at play. And well, one fairly busy slide, and I don't know if in case slides are distributed later, you'll actually be able to click on all the links, but I've kind of grouped some of our recent work into different streams. So we have our research and publications on the left, where we made perhaps the most recent big publication was the Global Feedstock Assessment. On the advocacy side, perhaps the most notable element is the SAF accounting reporting methodology. And on the solutions side, we have the SAF Matchmaker and the Kata SAF Registry that was launched, launched earlier this year. And I will not go into a lot of details on all of these things, but perhaps since my daily work is actually more on the solution side and trying to support our airlines on decarbonization with practical tools, I'll give a very quick hint on the Kata SAF Registry. So first of all, why Kata and not IATA, and what is this Kata thing? So Kata is a non-profit organization that has been set up in Canada by IATA to manage the SAF registry. And we did this ultimately with the goal of sort of decoupling the registry governance from IATA to an extent, to help buy-in from other industry players. And the whole registry is built to ensure that SAF environmental attributes can be tracked as they move across the SAF value chain without actually tracking physical SAF. So it does enable book and claim, and also to enable the claiming of SAF and its environmental benefits under both regulatory schemes and voluntary investments by both airlines and their customers. And to make sure that we have a lot of time for everyone else, I'll put the key attributes of the platform here on the slide quickly for reference. But perhaps what I'd want to highlight is that the Kata registry provides a lot of flexibility in the transactions and in the platform itself. So a lot of customizability that ultimately enables cost sharing across the value chain, which is essential to absorb the increased cost of SAF, to prevent adding additional cost layers The registry is free of charge until April 2027 for all users. And after that, it will be operated on a strictly operational cost recovery basis. So again, here we have the free or low cost element that we're trying to promote. And then perhaps mostly relevant for airline customers, but the registry is fully SABA eligible. So for those that are keen to follow SABA guidance, the registry fully tackles all those issues and requirements. So I hope this gives a glimpse of IATA's work in this space. And now with that, I will thank you for your attention. Happy to take any questions in the Q&A and give the floor back to Tiernan.
Ismar, thank you very much. Really good to hear the work of IATA going on there. Interesting development there with the Kata SAF registry as well. It's good to see that kind of very practical piece of solutions work. So interested to hear a bit more about that potentially in the Q&A as well. That reminds me as well, if anyone does have questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A box at the top of your screen throughout the session. We'll bank them and we can ask them, kind of put them to all of the speakers at the end. So please do feel free to pop any questions you have in there. But next up, before that, we have Sarah. Sarah, you're very welcome. I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you. Just do a slide check. Is that all good? Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. And yeah, thanks to IATA for setting the theme for SAF as well. So what I'm going to discuss today is an initiative that is supportive of the SAF industry, but coming from a bit of a different angle. So what I launched with a group in August, on August the 12th, was the Nuclear for E-Fuels initiative. And so that's myself and Fly Green Alliance, as well as Hydrogen Energy Association and Nuclear Hydrogen Initiative. And we've launched the initiative, actually, let me go to this slide. We've launched the initiative because we all became very aware that e-fuels, there are certain blockers to e-fuels, and also I was kind of doing research for the last few years, and it was coming up that, you know, the grid supply, access to the grid, all of these were extreme blockers. And as e-fuels already have financial blockers and final investment decision blockers, I realized this also was a blocker that needed to be worked on. So there are certain, we've got a certain agenda, but I'll just skip back to what we've been doing. So we have a certain agenda and I'll come back to it. But what we did when we started to discuss was groups such as UK Department of Business and Trade was saying, yes, there is a kind of gap in this area. We're pleased you're putting the initiative together and essentially are supportive. So our group also had an opportunity to feed back to Department of Energy Security Net Zero, DESNZ, fed back about certain points where policy could enable essentially nuclear power to support the supply chain need for e-fuels, and then what the e-fuels can be are essentially off-takers to future nuclear power plants, and what has now been developed as small modular reactors, which are smaller versions of the plants to essentially bring us more virtual power, and it is less reliant on the grid. So it's opening up opportunities for new decarbonised electricity supply. And as we are also collaborating with Hydrogen Energy Association, it's also opening up opportunities to increase the supply of decarbonised hydrogen, which is also needed for e-fuels. So there is various pieces of work going on, and what we found already is the cross-sector conversations and meetings are already, so for example, previously before, none of the small modular reactors or nuclear groups were thinking about SAF. Now we're starting to do this cross-sector work. many of the small modular reactor developers are all saying that end use can now be aviation or SAF. So it's what we're doing is really growing that stakeholder group, which is advocating, business developing, and then investing in SMRs, leading to increased supply for e-fuels. I realise now I've probably got not many minutes to speak about this topic. This is a 20-minute presentation I'm cutting down, but what we have now done, what we've been doing, as you can see from this slide, is basically a communication tour for the work to gain signatories for our initiative, which is essentially also bringing stakeholders to the SAF challenge, to build in the SAF market. And I've been actually doing this since last year, but set up the initiative in 2025. So I've spoken at International Atomic Energy Agency, World Nuclear Association, eFuel Summit, S&P Global. So there's lots of comms work happening with the initiative. At the launch, we had US Department of Energy attend, IATA, Smart Freight Center of World Nuclear Association. So it's really opening up that conversation. As Ismar will well know, it's led, sorry, I know I'm skipping around, it's led to also IATA has now been expanding what is deemed as a feedstock, and there's much more emphasis on low-cost renewable electricity and hydrogen and carbon capture, which is excellent. It means that even though there is an agnostic position by certain groups, it's now becoming an active agnostic position, which is really opening up opportunities for the SAF market and basically investors and producers. So I interviewed IATA actually a couple of weeks ago, so we're going to be posting these interviews soon. And just I've got a little bit of time to tell you about, so this is really the communication tour and what's been happening to bring everything together. And the real focus is this. It is to really remove misconceptions about nuclear power, to bring more societal acceptance for the greater good of energy supply and leading to SAF. We're also working on turning groups from a passive agnostic position to an active one, which is by having a position, including it in strategy, and then putting it into reports and working on it as a business case. And then what we are doing is knowledge sharing, removing blockers, as I mentioned. It is cross-sector development work, and it is really starting to de-risk SAF projects from a mitigation planning point of view. Policy development, of course, RFNBOs, there are certain restrictions around this, but of course, all policy comes to fruition and then often needs to be evolved and developed. So there's certain pieces of work that is happening. And then what we are really doing is building the business cases with partners. And we're doing this, we're doing it as an initiative, where we are not an association, so that we can do also the business development side of the work, and we can start doing that, putting the projects together as well. So it is a different approach, but it's all leading to our common goal of making the market work. So that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Sorry for the jumping around. These are some of our signatories so far, and what it has enabled is an opportunity to go out and speak to all different groups that, and actually Sophie is on the call today from Carbon Neutral Fuels. So there are a lot of groups that are now being contacted. Most do not have a position actually right now, and that is the big goal, is to start having a position and to start thinking about supply chain, how nuclear power can really contribute to e-fuels and the SAF production. So thanks very much. You can become a signatory, and I'll put the link in the chat. And then this is Fly Green Alliance. So thank you very much, tuning in.
Sarah, thank you very much. I think hitting on something really contemporaneous there. I mean, we've seen the recent policy developments, and seeing DESNZ and the government really putting SMR development at kind of the forefront of the energy transition there. So, you know, I'm sure we're going to see a lot more in this space. I've certainly got a couple of questions on that as well. Really interesting stuff. Thank you, Sarah. We'll move swiftly on then. We're going to hear now a little bit more about the technologies at play, especially around PTL, from Sophie and Kayode as well. So, Sophie, I'll bring you in now from a CNF perspective.
Absolutely. And just to say, I love these webinars because I've had a whole thing prepared and now I'm going to have to touch on what everyone else has spoken about because it's all super interesting. So thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name's Sophie and I'm co-founder at Carbon Neutral Fuels. We started the business just over 3 years ago now after a chance meeting at COP26, which was a fantastic experience, climate change festival in Glasgow. And Alistair and myself really wanted to make a difference in the world. And we came across the power to liquid opportunity, and both being outside the industry, my background is in nuclear energy, Alistair's in cloud computing. We didn't really have any precedent in this space, but we knew that we wanted to do something. And so we started Carbon Neutral Fuels. And I'll just tell you a little bit about where we've got up to date. So we are a project developer and we are following the Fischer-Tropsch pathway. We've got our flagship project, which is a 25,000 tonne per year synthetic blend component production facility. That's essentially like the cordial. You then go on to blend that with traditional jet fuel to make your sustainable aviation fuel. We've identified a location, so we're headed up to West Cumbria in the UK. The reasons for that are mostly dominated by the grid connection that Sarah touched on, and the availability of low carbon electrons in the UK is something that can be challenging depending on your site location. So we've been incredibly strategic in choosing that location for ourselves. As you mentioned, Jan, we're focusing on the Fischer-Tropsch side of the power to liquid market. We have done subsequent studies into the alcohol to jet side and are pursuing those, but for this lead project we are very much focused on the Fischer-Tropsch side. We've got, as a project developer, we felt like the speediest way to decarbonize and have a positive impact on climate change would be to work with existing vendors that had already done all of the lab scale testing and could bring that, firstly, that technology credibility, but also the bankability, something that project developers talk a lot about in this space is how do we actually build the thing? It's one thing knowing the technology and having the ideas, but it's another case actually getting the finance in place to then go on and subsequently build these facilities. So that was something that we were really conscious of. So the vendors that we've selected are incredibly well regarded and something that we're really proud of. I can't talk about them just yet, but follow us on LinkedIn and you'll, I'm sure there'll be some announcements shortly. In terms of how we actually make the fuel itself then, we take biogenic and direct air capture CO2. The reason we went for biogenic CO2 was partly due to regulation, actually. It was, in the UK, you can use any type of CO2 to make sustainable fuel, but we wanted to not restrict ourselves from a market perspective. In the EU from 2041, you will only be allowed to use biogenic or direct air capture. So we wanted to embed that really early on. And also it was just a principled matter of trying to use the most efficient CO2 that we possibly could. The direct air capture is an interesting one. We're partnered with Mission Zero Technologies, who are leading in the UK in terms of that DAC development. So we're really thrilled to be working with them. We take that raw CO2, we then electrolyze it to create the carbon monoxide. We do the same with water to create the hydrogen, smash them together, output jet fuel. In terms of the feedstock volumes, 110,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. So when we were considering that site selection, that's also something that's really important in terms of the availability, because it has some real knock-on impacts in terms of your logistics costs and all things like that. Something that has really enabled us as a business has been the support of the UK government. We were successful in window 2 of the Advanced Fuels Fund, and we received funding to do the feasibility and pre-feed studies for our facility. And we've subsequently been awarded £6 million of follow-on funding from window 3 of that grant allocation. So that's been incredibly enabling to us we've supplemented that with private equity and other types of fundraising. We did a crowdfund, which I don't know if any of you are supporters on here, but we now have over 300 investors through that platform. And I think Sarah talked a lot about doing things differently. And for us, coming from outside the aviation industry and having a motivation of wanting to do good and wanting to solve a big problem has enabled us to have that creativity and free thinking in how we actually go about that. So we have been able to do an awful lot in 3 short years worth of CNF life, and we have grand ambitions going forward. So I mentioned the other pathways. Alcohol to jet is something that's not currently passed via ASTM, but is very much on its way and is something that makes a lot of sense both for the UK market and for the European market. So yeah, a lot to say, but perhaps I'll stop there and wait for the questions.
Sophie, thank you very much. I can see a couple already lining up. So so yeah, good material for that Q&A session. And you know, I've got to say as well, we had a couple of your colleagues at our Next Gen Aviation Pathfinder in the summer, and you know, it's really good to hear the work going on from CNF. It's really interesting stuff. So thank you very much for that. Kayode is up next. Kayode, I think you're going to go into a bit more detail around Fischer-Tropsch and the benefits of that technology as well. So Kayode, you're very welcome. I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. My name is Kayode Osonuga, founder of Information Aid Resources. We're a technological company that helps manufacturers and individuals scale up their technology readiness levels from prototyping to full manufacturing scale up. And my contribution to SAF is particularly in the power to liquid technology, specifically Fischer-Tropsch technology. And I currently work in the operational life cycles sector, where I do groundwork development and analysis of these technologies, where we look at like syngas compositions of synthetic fuels. That's like hydrogen and carbon monoxide. We also look at like the catalytic performances, the selectivities. We look at like the downstream upgrading. We look at the reactor sizes and whatnot. So on my day-to-day work, we produce these things, we analyze them, and then we also look at how we could scale it up in terms of the reaction rates and what we can do to scale it up. From what we've seen that like the science is there. We could create fuel, SAF fuel that is comparable to Jet A1 fuel, or even slightly better in terms of the emissions, in terms of how well our fuel burns and how low the emissions are. And then we've seen that. So the main challenge is in terms of scaling and integration, because to produce Fischer-Tropsch, you need the same gases, which is hydrogen, CO, and you could get that. The current project I'm working with, we get these feedstocks through electrolysis. That's the breakdown of water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then direct air capture, similar to Sophie, and then we run that through a process called reverse water gas shift, and after that we then run it through our direct FT. This process is quite interesting and it has full potential because the feedstocks are abundant compared to other pathways in this SAF production. So I'm glad to be here and I'm ready to welcome some questions in my process.
Kayode, thank you very much. I think you touch on something really interesting and important there at the end, is kind of the abundance of these feedstocks as well, and that's certainly something I've seen in conversations across the sector, and potentially something we could touch on in the Q&A as well. So thank you very much for that. Okay, last but not least, before we do head over to the Q&A session, we'll hear from Kata to round out the opening remarks as well. So Kata, you're very welcome. I'll hand over to you now.
Great. Thank you for having me. It's nice to go last. So I've listened to what you've had to say, particularly as I was a bit of a last minute step in for Ulrika. So let me just see. I did pull together a couple of slides because I'm a consultant. I can't speak without slides. So let me just see if I can get that to work. Go right. Hopefully you can see that. So I'll probably just talk about three things and from a slightly different perspective. So you kindly introduced me. I'm the global aviation lead at PA. So that's my background, 20 years working with airlines, airports and investors. But probably for the last between 5 and 10 years, that's increasingly overlapped with the energy side, which we're starting to pick up on from the previous panelists. So I'll give you my perspective and my team's perspective, which spans then that aviation side and the energy side. And the first point that I think is worth making, which I think should be reassuring, is that the scale up that we're talking about in SAF is unique to a certain extent, but certainly not the first energy transition or scale up of a new technology. And so we do already have some lessons and blueprints about what the building blocks are that have to be in place. And it's great to this webinar is a great example of this. We've already touched on some of these building blocks and those different parties that are required. Just keeping it really high level, and some of you might have heard me talk about this, but this bridge essentially, it signifies the fact that all of these building blocks need to be in place. It's not just one or the other, because you can imagine, you don't have to be an engineer, but if one of these blocks is missing, it's very hard to have something that actually gets us from one side to the other. So in very simple terms, we're talking about capital, technology, infrastructure, and skills. These are the resources that are required to get us to scale SAF and any other new technology. We then also importantly, and work has been underway, and this is often where a lot of the focus is, I'll also touch on this a little bit, we must have frameworks that enable the scale up. So we speak the same language. People who are working in the scale up have clarity about the rules of the game, about what we're talking about. Many things are new, many of the commercial structures are new. So having the frameworks in place is also critically important. That covers policy and regulation, which we talk a huge amount about, but also very, very importantly, given the safety critical nature, the complex ecosystem, we must have robust legal compliance and assurance frameworks. And then the third bit, which is accelerators, and these are really what turbocharge the scale up and come in different flavors. With market development support is one, and we've already heard about the AFF. I'll also touch on that a bit. That's just one example. There's many others. And then awareness and collaboration, also really important. All of these basically need to be in place. It's also not the same kind of building blocks as we scale up SAF over time. So much like the IATA chart, I don't have a dot on this one, but essentially we are still very much at the early stages of this line that you see on here. And the types of support and the types of involvement, the types of activities will change over time. And as somebody who's been active in this for some time, you're already starting to see some of these evolutions. Also importantly, different markets globally will be at different stages as well. So the UK, where we had the first commercial SAF flights as far back as almost 20 years ago, is in a different place of maturity across many of these than some markets which are much more recently opening up to the possibilities of SAF. And that doesn't have to correlate with the maturity and development level of the economy on a traditional basis. As a recent example, Australia, an advanced OECD country, has in the last 12 months taken rapid strides, having been a bit more on the backseat. So this is not a developing country distinction. This is over time and in line with scale up. So that's, I guess, just first point. So not the first time this is done. It has to fit together, but there are blueprints and lessons from other scale-ups. This is sort of the webinar, I think, is UK focused. So this is just a latest one. So what does this look like in practice? We're at the beginning of the scale-up curve. We have activity in capital, we have activity in technology. Certainly the frameworks are in development. The UK has the mandate in place. We're most of the way through year one. We've got the revenue certainty mechanism under development. And as Sophie already mentioned, we've had 3 rounds of the AFF, in addition to a suite of other projects. I will apologise already to anyone if any of this is wrong. It's a thankless task for our team to try and keep this map up to date. But essentially, it gives you an indication of there's a lot going on, but actually in terms of the volume of SAF producers, that there's one plant currently actually outputting the Phillips 66 and making SAF, but there is a lot coming. And it's a range of technology pathways, a range of commercial models, who will ultimately also deliver SAF to a range of UK offtake ports. And importantly, and if we get a chance to touch on logistics, the importing, the exporting, the blending, the storage, these are also some of the building blocks that will go towards scale up. So this is just my latest snapshot, but up for corrections and up for discussion on the map. The main point is we are starting to see some clusters. You can see where some of the locations, and again, Sophie already mentioned some of the considerations for where projects are developing, but the enabling policies and the conditions for new projects to get started, and then importantly to move towards FID and commercial scale. This is really the stage that we're at. So this is just a UK snapshot right now. I've got a mild plug, but only because I hope you will find it interesting. It's a report freely available to anyone. We called it Cacophony to Symphony because there is a huge amount of noise, and there's a huge amount of disconnected noise around the world in SAF scale up. So what we did earlier this year was surveyed about 600 stakeholders around the world, from producers to investors, airlines and airports, synthesize their views on a regional basis, and also added some of our own views. And I'll just share some of the very high level findings, which you're welcome to dig into and happy to discuss also on the Q&A. The number one thing, and you'll hear everybody say that the number one reason that is cited is cost. So the cost of SAF to the purchaser is universally cited as the barrier for scale up. There's also a range of opinions on how much more SAF is going to cost. Costs shouldn't be insurmountable, and there are many ways that costs can be brought down, and market structures, market support is one of them. Technology advances, economies of scale. This is expected to come down, but certainly cost is an issue, and one that needs to be tackled for SAF to scale along the lines of those hockey sticks that we see all around us. There's also a range of sentiments. I think this is worth recognizing, that whilst overall the industry and those following the industry and those following the energy transition within aviation fully, I would say, believe that SAF is a key lever, even whilst we focus on electric, hydrogen, other solutions further down the line. There is a range in terms of the level of optimism around widespread adoption, because this is hard, and we're in this really tricky bit up front, and the different concerns by project developers versus the off-takers, as an example, is something that I think is worth unpicking, and is certainly helping us to unlock some more of that scale up. And then this is just again a data point from the survey. What else apart from cost? You've heard me mention the cost piece. There's a range of challenges, and many of these are interconnected. And it'd be interesting to pick this up in the discussion. What are people really pointing at? And the ones that I'd probably like to highlight, the second one down, limited production capacity, is kind of the other side of the they sort of go hand in hand, but inconsistent government policies and regulations. This is something that you hear consistently, that makes it really challenging for both the producers and the investors to make long-term investment decisions on, but also importantly, the airlines, the fuel suppliers. And then another one, which perhaps gets a little bit less attention, but increasingly is really where stuff gets real, is around getting the product, once you're actually making the pure SAF, there's still a lot that needs to happen once you're producing that to actually get it into the wing of an aircraft. So all of those commercial relationships, the infrastructure and the logistics, which adds considerable cost and complexity, is another thing that this new growing ecosystem needs to unpick. So I think that was all I was going to say. There's just another graphic in here which it takes a little while to explain, but I'd encourage you to unpick. We asked all of these stakeholders, the 600 plus, whose job is it? Who really is? Who should be responsible for helping to scale this? And everyone has a different opinion on this, and I think that shows that both it's a multifaceted solution, but you also see from these arrows that there are more arrows pointing at regulators and governments than anyone else, and I think that is something that we need to remember, need to engage again in that scale-up bridge, that having the frameworks and having the government support and the right structures in place is really the thing that will underpin all of the rest. So I will pause there. I'll stop sharing. That's a couple of my perspectives, and happy to move into the discussion.
Kata, thank you very much indeed. We've got about 20 minutes or so for questions, so let's get into it. I'm wondering if I could stick with you quickly and just ask a question myself, Kata, around one of those points that you mentioned in terms of the barriers for growth around government policy and inconsistent government policy. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit on how the UK's current regulatory and market intervention regime kind of compares and contrasts to others around the world. I mean, we've now got the SAF mandate. We've got the government working on a revenue certainty mechanism right now. Is the market kind of looking at the UK as a desirable place now because of this? Is that showing steps in the right direction towards more consistent policy? Any thoughts on that?
To keep it short, the answer is yes, it needs to be faster, right? I think basically the UK is ticking many of the boxes. And in my work with investors who are looking at projects in the US, or who might be looking at projects in Australia or the Middle East or in the EU, the UK is seen as a very positive place for the reasons of policy clarity, seen to be a relatively long-term policy certainty. Now, nothing really is long-term certain, but more predictable, for example, than the US, which has seen a huge shift from one position to a different one. So the UK is seen as very positive. The RCM, I think, will be a key next step, because we are certainly seeing a hesitation and a delay. And I'd be interested, Sophie, in your experiences from off-takers who are basically saying, until we know what the RCM actually is going to say, we will not commit to off-takes, which then makes proper serious fundraising and financing at the project level quite challenging. But mandate is very positive. It provides you the volume certainty. AFF is very positive, and the fact that it's continuing to essentially motivate and sustain first of a kind new technologies that will provide the foundations, all very positive. We need to fix the revenue certainty to unlock some of that capital, which is interested, which does believe in this solution. They just can't take it to the bank yet, if that makes sense. So that's my thoughts on it. So very positive. We'd just like to see that last piece, and then I think a number of things will unlock. But Sophie, I don't know if that's consistent with your experience.
Yes, very, very well put. I would agree with all of that. To build on it, I think the revenue certainty mechanism will make a big difference to our investor conversations, because, like you say, it gives that certainty, Kata. If that's not done, though, in tandem with a published timeline as to rounds 2, 3, and 4, then it's still challenging. So CNF, we're currently in the feed stage of work, which means that we will actually be ready to bid into round 1. There's questions about to what extent e-fuels will be supported within that round one. But given projects like ours are now in that scope of being able to bid in and actually have a really good chance of being successful, that is incredibly positive. But yes, in terms of round two and actually building out that industry, we still need information from government about what that timetable looks like, because I can talk from my perspective, we will finish the feed stage in the next 6 to 9 months. We've got a ready-made package that we can now deploy multiple times. But if there's not the momentum and the certainty from government for how we get the revenue certainty for sites 2 and 3, then that's not going to build an industry. So I appreciate that it's a very thankless and very challenging task. And we are almost there, but there are still, and it comes back to that critical finance side. The technology is sound and it's proven and it's bankable, as Kayode suggested as well. It's how do we make it a commercial opportunity?
Thanks, Sophie. Really good points. Does anyone else want to come in on any of those points before we continue?
Yeah,
sure, Sarah.
And I've just posted in the chat the consultation that is open about the revenue certainty mechanism, which closes on 8th of January. So if there are groups on the call that can also respond and give their insights, thought, expertise, then I would say that was very welcome, and it will only support what Kata and Sophie has mentioned. So I would, yeah, so definitely look into that. If there are also investors and banks on the call, that this is the kind of information that is required to basically get projects to FID. So yeah, it's all getting that. But obviously it might not be talking just about the UK today as well, but there are a few of us that are more focused on the UK. But there is work happening. I'm also aware of a lot of feasibility studies now happening in Asia and Africa, and so there is even this, there is budget for feasibility. So there's there is global work going on to make it a level playing field, and there is, I do believe the UK's policy is leading edge, but it's but I know there's leveling up and the start of work happening all over. So that's really positive. That it's of course Europe tends to lead the way, but it's also really positive that even though the US is, some of the tax incentives have receded, and for SAF it is still present. It is there. So it is relevant to keep all the, I know there are certain project developers that are maybe not choosing to go to different areas for some years, but actually they're still having the conversations, business development within the US as well. So yeah, it is happening.
Thanks, Sarah. Another really quick one from me then. Sorry, Ismar, I saw you put your hand up there. Please feel free to come in.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to put a quick remark sort of from the kind of other side of the table. I think at IATA we definitely acknowledge that that we do need, and I think that that's apparent, that we need this long-term certainty for projects to get through, to get those investments, to get the SAF available. But of course, with the revenue certainty mechanism, and with that, I think we see it as a good initiative, but also to be wary of sort of who ultimately pays for that. And of course, just to highlight that our industry, often is seen as basically the ones that need to take the brunt of the cost because they're passed on. We are a pretty low margin business, and that's another tricky thing to do with the revenue certainty mechanism. So it's a complex piece of policy for sure. So I think it's a lot of considerations there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I can come in again, sorry, Tina, did you want to?
Sure. No, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking about the production today, really. Now, the last 6 years of Fly Green Alliance's work has also mostly been about creating the demand side, bringing awareness, advocacy, like you mentioned, IATA does, Ismar, and really building in the net zero commitments. Of course, we've seen a bit of a wave back, you know, basically recede again of some of the net zero commitments because we're in a cost of living, all these things. But there is kind of some work getting through, but it is going to be a challenge to get the off-takers. Of course, there's the challenge, the airline off-take challenge, but that, of course, is essentially a traveller challenge. It's the cost of passing it on to travellers and business travellers mostly at this point. And then again, there's all the work happening. Every single group that is focused on SAF is also working on that. I'm sure Kata will be working on projects with this, and Sophie, I know, and group and CNF are working on demand. So there's all groups are really trying to do the both sides, because you can't do one without the other. So yeah, I see it's still, there's a lot of work to do. It is a communication challenge. It is a getting the strategies, the science-based targets, all of this in place, book and claim. So, but it is all moving along. So it's yeah, getting that.
Thanks, Sarah. Kayode, I saw you had your hand up there. Do you want to come in with a final word on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to just lay down that the challenge we're trying to solve is decarbonizing flights. So it's not really a cost thing, even though that's how we can make it work. The current technology we have can already solve it. And because of the technological readiness we are in, we can actually create better fuels, and even close to compare, our fuel is better in quality. And we need to, I think that's why when we talk about like who should bear the cost and whatnot, it's about the people that own capital and how we can use that capital to solve the problem we have. So take for example, like when the introduction of fossil fuels started coming into play, there was huge there was huge capital pump into it. Before then, we were using coal, and the importance of that is we need capital to enhance the technology. And there's already huge potential in our technology already. So in terms of like emissions, like SAF, having SAF already is already solving the problem of reducing the CO in the atmosphere. And there's already a huge potential of getting more fuel that is more power efficient, because we can create, and we influence the molecules, we influence the aromatics, we can influence components of the fuel. It's so important that like we invest more in R&D and in scaling up. So I think when we talk about SAF, we shouldn't just talk about the commercial aspect. We should talk about the funding. We should talk about the actual problem, decarbonizing flights, which is an issue. Because CO and emissions are going to be CO emissions are increasing there year after year, and the demand of flights is also increasing year after year. So it's very important that we also look at the problem in that aspect, that if we don't get the right funding, if we don't get the right people, if we don't get the right technology in place, we won't solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that point, Kata, of moving faster. We're going in the right direction, but it needs to be faster, I think is the key message there. Really interesting. Thank you. I'm gonna move on from that point, just because there's a few questions built up in the Q&A. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, so let's get to a few of them. Shiva Lu asks, Shiva wants to know, I'm wondering what the main potential sources of CO2 for e-fuel production are. Sophie, I'm wondering if you have any thought in that, and potentially Kayode as well from your business as well. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ASAP DAC site is evaluating the use of predominantly paper pulp CO2, which counts as a biogenic source. Reasons being is our location is close to the port, so import-export makes a lot of sense for that site. As I mentioned, also direct air capture CO2 is something that's on our agenda, and we have kept it. We're working with the direct air capture folk because we recognise that that's an industry that is growing and scaling. And whilst it's not fulfilling the majority of our CO2 needs right now, there is a lot of potential for that in the future. When we first started, we did look at point source CO2 and whether we would want to use that. We made the decision not to, just because we felt like from an ethical point of view, recycling that CO2 once and then still emitting it into the atmosphere just didn't fit with what we were trying to achieve. And we then backed that thesis up with actually, okay, yes, and we can get the cost right and we can get the logistics right for the biogenic side of the CO2. So that's a decision we've made. But I will say that in terms of our site selection, the CO2 feedstock availability is the second factor in our site selection criteria, because there are challenges associated with the kind of tussle between, does it make more sense financially for companies to sequester that CO2, and are there more incentives there? Does it make more sense to actually use the CO2? So it's, yeah, we could have a whole webinar on feedstock availability, but they're the decisions we've made.
Thanks, Sophie. Moving on then very quickly, there's just sticking on that pipeline point as well. Jared Knott asks, is there ambitions and/or plans to repurpose the current Exolum pipeline system in the UK for SAF? And is this a large undertaking, or is a new pipeline system needed for the UK to adequately supply SAF across the country, especially if more emphasis is being placed on how to enable more production, i.e. the SMR's plan for the UK, which may not align to current pipelines established? And I'm wondering, you know, just on that, there's really interesting things going on around airports as energy hubs and kind of co-location there as well. Did the panel have any thoughts, first of all, on this pipeline issue, and any thoughts on kind of co-location and airports as energy hubs? Any thoughts?
SAF can generally be blended and be and so good as it's possible to put it in the pipelines. It's been a political topic in Europe, but actually over the years, the political aspects of whether it's allowed in the pipelines has been, actually, I believe it's the same in the UK, but I have been, maybe Kata knows that one.
Yeah, I mean, certainly blended SAF can travel in the pipeline. That's it, and that's basically universally accepted. There are challenges around capacity and access points and who controls the access. So that can be a challenge. Often more of the pinch point is around where you do your blending, or some of the key questions commercially on where you do the blending, how you then get access, and actually what makes the most sense for where you're trying to take it. So it gets fairly detailed quite quickly, because oftentimes the best way to, well, it depends who you're trying to serve, right? Is your off-taker in East Midlands, and therefore are you best off trucking it? Is your off-taker in a Scottish airport? Is your off-taker somewhere else? So it's not as simple as you chuck it in the pipeline, because then who owns the product? It gets the commercial and the infrastructure, it gets tangled. So it'll be very specific. I can't therefore give you a comprehensive answer, but in principle, blended SAF can go in a pipeline. That's the short answer to a really complex question. Yeah. If you want to talk more, let me know. I can introduce you. And it looks like Sophie's got a perspective.
Yeah, again, another whole webinar. Yes, the excellent pipeline makes a lot of sense, but yes, you have to consider things like duty point. Does it make sense for a producer to be have the duty point for the blending site or not? Who's the obligated party? So yeah, a whole load of stuff would be great to pick up with you, Jared, separately.
And it also is getting shipped in, so it can be, SAF is getting shipped and it can come from Rotterdam and so there is all sorts of other logistics points that it depends. It's very specific to the need in the project as mentioned.
Thanks, Sarah. We're very quickly running out of time. It's such a shame. I would have loved to flesh out a few more of these points. I'm wondering if I suppose just for time, we can finish on this last question from Vicky Paley. Just going back to your point there, Kayode, that you made. Vicky agrees, but unfortunately, she argues that it all comes down to who pays. The main problem with SAF from airlines is that they don't have line of sight on long-term pricing and can't hedge in the same way that they do with jet fuel. She asks a question for you, Kata. How do you think we could overcome this, as jet fuel is pegged to oil and SAF is not? I suppose any thoughts on that to kind of finish off?
Sorry, the honest answer is somebody just tried to kick me out of this room and I missed your question.
No
what
worries.
was the question?
Let me go again. Vicky's basically saying that it is in the chat. She's basically saying that the main problem is who pays for this, right? And she says airlines don't have line of sight and long-term pricing and can't hedge in the same way that they do with jet fuel. So she's wondering if you have any thoughts on how this could be overcome, as jet fuel is pegged to oil, SAF is not.
Wow, that is, like Sophie just said, that's a whole other webinar, right? So most airlines nowadays don't hedge their jet fuel or otherwise. It oscillates a huge amount. You look at the price of Brent over the last 20 years, and it's way beyond what you're seeing in oscillation and feedstock costs for SAF that we're talking about. So point number one, managing jet fuel is already difficult. It exposes airlines to huge volatility. Very importantly, however, everyone's in the same boat. And I think IATA would hopefully agree with me on this, is that airlines manage this key cost item very well. It's a huge area of focus for them. The reason that the SAF piece gets really problematic, because you're introducing a difference between one airline's commercial decisions and cost base and another. So that's why it's particularly sensitive and problematic. To give an example, airline A just buys 100% jet fuel. They rise and fall with the tide. They take those costs. Airline B then says, I'm going to go all in overnight and do 10% SAF. And that increases their cost base, which they then have to either erode through their margins or pass on through to their passengers, who are very price sensitive. In simple terms, that's what the economics boils down to. The way you get round it is through commercial structuring of offtake contracts, where you're bridging the green premium and you work through that. But again, that is complex, it's technical, it'll be bespoke to each supplier and each off-taker. We are seeing some really interesting commercial models and deals, whether they are fixed, whether they are pegged to feedstock. There's some interesting indexations emerging, but yeah, so I can't do that question justice. It's a really interesting topic, and maybe one to pick up on another one. I do now have to get out of this room because I'm holding up about 10 people, but I'll stay on and listen. And apologies. Just bear with me. I'll go off camera.
No worries, Kata. Great answer under pressure. Yeah, of course.
That is why it is taking so long, because it is on a case-by-case basis, and the contracting. There are certain law firms that are really getting a lot of experience in it now, so they are helping crunch through. But again, it takes time, and that's why it's not scaling, as quickly as we were. But yeah, it's really interesting topics, lots to develop further. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, folks. It's as you said, I think a number of these things that was brought up in the discussion and the presentations as well could be scope for hour-long discussions themselves. But thank you so much to the panel for joining us, Ismar, Sophie, Sarah, Kayode, and Kata. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and contribution to a really interesting discussion. Thanks very much for your great questions as well from the floor. Just to let you all know that there will be a recording of today's proceedings that will be sent across to you all shortly after the close of play. You won't be able to access it straight away from the Teams, but we'll get that to you. And all I'd say really is watch this space, because there's certainly so much more discussion to be had here across the value chain of SAF. So we've scratched the surface today, but a lot more to go into. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. Just a final plug, if I may, if these conversations are of interest, please do consider checking out the Foresight event as well, but for discussions on this and across the energy transition and industrial strategy as well. So we'll leave it there. for a Thursday morning. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your week and weekend when it comes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Kata. Bye-bye.